Live from Davos, I'm Christian Fraser. This is BBC News. President Trump says he's had a good meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky in Davos. The Ukrainian leader says they are now in the final mile of the negotiation with Russia. But he had some harsh words for the Europeans who talk tough on defence, he says, but don't do enough.
Kill enough people and you stay in power. Who in Europe needs that message to become a reality?
Also in Davos, President Trump has signed the Charter for Gaza's new Board of Peace with 20 nations that joined him on stage, but Europe and the UK are reserving judgment. There's been a climb down on Greenland. President Trump says a framework deal has been agreed and he's withdrawn the threat of further tariffs on his European allies, but the details of that plan are yet to be revealed.
Our other main headlines here. Could the expected decision of a Labour MP to stand down have leadership consequences for Keir Starmer? And the horror film Sinners sets a new Oscars record with a whopping 16 nominations. We'll bring you the latest from LA ahead of this year's Academy Awards.
Hello, a warm welcome to Davos. It's a very busy afternoon with movement on Ukraine, on the Middle East peace plan and the row on Greenland that has overshadowed the entire week. On stage in the last hour, President Zelensky, after his meeting with Donald Trump, a meeting he said that went well. We're in the final mile, he said. Yeah, you're quite right. I can go into the warmth here, but 3 or 4 hours standing out here, you really do feel the cold. So I can't imagine what it's like in Ukraine, where the temperatures are much, much lower. Cyril Amorski, good to talk to you. You stay safe. Thank you very much for being with us on the programme. We're going to take a short break around the world and across the UK. This is BBC News. Welcome back to Davos. Prior to the meeting with the Ukrainian president this afternoon, Mr. Trump held a signing ceremony on stage with those who have agreed to join his Board of Peace. The Europeans, though, and the UK were not present on stage, which really does tell you an awful lot about where the relationship is at the moment. President Trump said he believed it will help forge what he called a glorious and everlasting peace for the Middle East and the wider world. Take a listen. Minister, I'm very grateful for your time. I know you're busy. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on the programme. You hear there, in the words of the Minister, some of the caution which we've heard from other European leaders today. That framework agreement might be in place, but they're reserving judgment on whether the crisis has been fully headed off.
Welcome back to BBC News. Let's turn to our main headlines here. Donald Trump meets President Zelensky in Davos and says ending the war is in reach, but the Ukrainian president takes aim at European leaders, urging them to do more. Also in Davos, President Trump unveils the so-called Board of Peace aimed at resolving international conflicts. Most European governments decline to join. Here, the Labour MP Andrew Gwynn is expected to leave Parliament, according to sources. But could it have ramifications for Keir Starmer as Prime Minister? And the horror film Sinners sets a new Oscars record with a whopping 16 nominations. We'll talk to Talking Movies presenter Tom Brooke and the producers of Frankenstein. So let's get back to our main story, Davos, because Ukraine's President Zelensky has made a speech really critical of European leaders at Davos, saying it was good at planning for the future, but could not tackle the problems of today. He asked why Europe could not stop tankers from Russia's shadow fleet and seize the oil. Ian Watson, live for us there at Westminster. Thanks very much. Around the world and across the UK, you are watching BBC News. Welcome back to BBC News. Let's spend the next few minutes talking about Oscars and the nominations, the 98th Oscars. Those nominations have been announced today ahead of the ceremony on the 15th of March. The supernatural horror film Sinners has the most nominations overall in 16 categories, setting a new Oscars record. Miles, it's been fascinating talking to you. I wish I had longer, but I haven't. But thank you for joining us. Good luck on the big night.
Thank you so much, and thanks to all of our Brits.
Pleasure. We're about to take a short break. We're live back in Davos here on the programme in a moment or two. Don't go away. Live from London, this is BBC News. We will be live in Davos with Christian Fraser here in a moment or two with all the very latest. We've had a meeting between President Zelensky and Donald Trump. But before we go to Davos, let me bring you one headline here in the UK and news that the Labour MP Andrew Gwynn has now stood down as a Labour MP. That could have ramifications for the PM Keir Starmer. We'll explain more on that here in a moment or two. Welcome to BBC News and today's Verified Live. It has been another really busy day in Davos. In the last couple of hours, President Zelensky has been speaking, addressing, being really critical of European leaders. Earlier, of course, we had that Board of Peace being announced by Donald Trump. So let's go back to Davos and go back to Christian Fraser, who's there for us. Christian, over to you. Christian, thanks very much. Plenty more from Christian in the next hour. I want to turn to breaking news here, British politics, because the Labour MP Andrew Gwynn is to stand down from Parliament. Gwynn, a former health minister, had the Labour whip removed last year over offensive WhatsApp messages. He's also had health issues. Now, all of this is significant because his seat has been mentioned as a possible route back to Parliament for the Manchester Mayor, Andy Burnham, who has been linked with a leadership challenge to Keir Starmer. So confirmation then that Andrew Gwynn is to stand down. And of course, now we wait to see what will happen because Andy Burnham, lots of chatter around him potentially getting back to Parliament and potentially in the future standing against Keir Starmer. Of course, nothing from him yet on whether he wants to stand in this by-election. There's also procedural rules. It is possible that the Labour NEC could block the move. That would have problems in itself. So there are so many moving parts. And of course, they're coming up to the local elections. And of course, Andy Burnham, Wes Streeting have both been mentioned as potential possible leadership rivals. We'll talk to Nick Watt here in the next hour.
Now on BBC News, the latest business news from across the globe. Business Today.
A deal or a climb down? President Trump rows back on threats over Greenland and tariffs as he meets European leaders in Davos.
People thought I would use force, but I don't have to use force. I don't want to use force. I won't use force.
And President Trump may not like it, but new research says wind and solar power generated more electricity in the EU than fossil fuels did last year. We'll talk all things energy a little later, but welcome to the programme. This is Business Today, and European leaders are breathing a sigh of relief right now as President Trump says a framework on a future deal on Greenland is now on the table. Well, after talks with NATO, the president has dropped the threat of new tariffs on European countries. A reminder, there's much more on all those stories for you on the BBC News website right now, bbc.com/business, including all the very latest from our economics editor, Faisal Islam, who is there. So it has been a week of ups and downs. We've talked about some of the impact on the financial markets as investors digest what they've heard, but really important questions right now around Donald Trump's plans for the economy, and if indeed he threatens further tariffs elsewhere, whether anyone expects that he will follow through. More on the website, bbc.com/business. But that is your Business Today. Bye-bye.
Welcome back to BBC News and today's Verified Live. Let's talk about the Oscars again, because nominations for the 98th Oscars have been announced earlier today ahead of the ceremony on the 15th of March. The supernatural horror film Sinners has the most nominations overall, 16 categories, setting a new Oscars record. Alongside Sinners, the political thriller One Battle After Another, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, is nominated for Best Picture. Jessie Buckley, who's on a winning run with her performance as William Shakespeare's wife in Hamlet, is also among the nominees. Absolutely borne out in today's nominations. Pippa Harris, thank you for taking time to speak to us, and good luck on the big night. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Let me point you to the BBC website, because a full rundown, all the details of the Oscar nomination, it's there for you. You are watching BBC News. Now, let's turn to an important story here, because the Duke of Sussex has returned to court in London for the fourth day of his trial in his legal action against the publisher of the Daily Mail. Prince Harry arrived earlier today after giving evidence for around 2 hours at the Royal Courts of Justice on Wednesday. Well, earlier today, the actress Elizabeth Hurley was in tears, telling the court that she felt crushed over the brutal invasion of privacy by the publisher. Our correspondent Helena Wilkinson has more from the courts. We're going to take a short break. When we are back, we'll be back live with Christian Fraser in Davos after another busy day. That is coming up here in just a moment or two. Don't go away.
Live from Davos, I'm Christian Fraser. This is BBC News. President Trump says he's had a good meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky in Davos. The Ukrainian leader says they're now in the final mile of the negotiation with Russia. But he had some harsh words for the Europeans who talk tough on defence, he says, but don't do enough.
Kill enough people and you stay in power. Who in Europe needs that message to become a reality?
The Prime Minister of Greenland says he's not seen the details of the framework agreement that was secured last night with President Trump. But he says Greenland is ready to work constructively with the US, so long as it's with mutual respect.
Nobody else than Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark have the mandate to make deals or agreements about Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark without us.
Also in Davos, President Trump has signed the charter for Gaza's new Board of Peace, with 20 nations that joined him on stage. But Europe and the UK are reserving judgment.
Our other main headlines: the former Minister Andrew Gwynn confirms he's to stand down as a Labour MP, but could it have ramifications for Keir Starmer as Prime Minister? And the horror film Sinners sets a new Oscars record with a whopping 16 nominations. We'll bring you all the latest from LA.
Hello, welcome to Davos. President Zelensky says the negotiation to end the war in Ukraine is in the final mile. The Ukrainian leader met with Donald Trump for nearly an hour this afternoon, in which the two finally signed off on the security guarantees for Ukraine. But outstanding, still, the issue of territory and the demands from Moscow that Ukraine leaves areas in the east of the country that it still occupies.
Christian, we'll leave it there. Tremendous coverage from Davos from you over the last couple of days. Thanks very much for now. Thank you. Around the world and across the UK, you're watching BBC News. Welcome back to Verified Live. Let's return to that breaking story here with British politics, because the Labour MP Andrew Glynn has to stand down from Parliament. Gwynn, a former health minister, had the Labour whip removed last year over offensive WhatsApp messages. Now, it is significant because Mr Gwynn's seat has been mentioned as a possible route back to Parliament for the Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham, who is linked, of course, to a possible leadership challenge to Keir Starmer. Well, with me here in the studio is Newsnight's political editor Nick Watt. And Nick, absolutely fascinating. There is so much chatter around this because, as I was mentioning there is the potential here of Andy Burnham returning to Parliament and everything that potentially could flow from that. All right, Nick Watt, I'm sure you'll be back on Newsnight in a few hours' time with more of the intelligence that you've been gathering. Thanks so much for your thoughts and your analysis on that breaking development and why it is significant in terms of British politics. Before we break, I'm going to take you back to this picture here, which is Emmanuel Macron. He's there at the European leaders gathering, and of course, so much to discuss after the events in Davos. He's speaking in French. We will try to establish some of the significant things that perhaps comes out of any comments in the next little while. But of course, all those EU leaders gathering to try to make sense of what has been a whirlwind at Davos on Greenland, on NATO. They've been listening about those developments about Ukraine. So those gatherings, the arrivals just happening. We saw Friedrich Merz a little earlier. But we'll have more on all of that here in the next 30 minutes. But you are right up to date on today's Verified Live.
The day's most important stories, sent every weekday direct to your inbox. Get the news you need to know and understand what it means for you. Don't miss out. Stay informed. Go to bbc.co.uk/newsdaily and sign up now.
Welcome back to BBC News. Let's turn to our main headlines here. Donald Trump meets President Zelensky in Davos and says ending the war is getting closer. But the Ukrainian president takes aim at European leaders in a fiery speech and urges them to do more. The Prime Minister of Greenland warns Donald Trump against trying to acquire the island by force, saying it would be completely unacceptable. Details of a framework agreement supposedly agreed with Washington are yet to be made public. The former Minister Andrew Gwynn confirms he is to stand down as a Labour MP. Will it provide a way back to Parliament for the Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham? And the horror film Sinners sets a new Oscars record with a whopping 16 nominations. We'll hear from Talking Movies presenter Tom Brooke, and also we talk to the producer of Frankenstein. So let's return to what we've been seeing out of Davos on yet another busy day. The US President Donald Trump at the centre of all of it. The day began with a signing ceremony for the US leaders' new Board of Peace plan, billed by the US as a new international organisation for resolving conflicts, and urged a legal probe against him. So we'll keep an eye on those proceedings out of Washington. But that's it from today's Verified Live. It's been a busy programme. Thanks for watching, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Hello there. It's been very wet and murky with poor road conditions over the past